Right. Welcome to your 15th session of Tattva Bodha. So we just entered the topic of Samashti Vichara, the study of the macrocosm. Now, similar to the Vyashti, the microcosm, we saw how, which was a mixture of Atma and Anatma. We saw that the macrocosm is also looks to be a mixture of this Atma and Anatma. And at the Samashti level, we call them Brahman and Maya. So different names for the same thing. At the cosmic level, it's Brahman and Maya. And at the Vyashti level, we call them, Atman and the Karana Shariram. So whatever the name, it is you that I'm talking about, the eternal, all-pervading, unchanging you. Just like the unmanifest form of the Jiva is always there as the Karana Shariram, the unmanifest form of the universe always exists as this Maya Shakti. And this Maya Shakti is made up of three gunas. I'm just checking if the recording is active. So the Maya Shakti is made of three gunas, I told you, just like three strands of a braid, which, without which the braid itself does not exist, right? So these three account for the three faculties experienced by all living beings. Sattva, the knowing faculty, Rajas, the doing or the responding faculty, and Tamas, the resting faculty. When before manifestation, these three gunas exist in an equilibrium. And when this equilibrium is disturbed, the process of manifestation of the universe starts. But none of this is random. How do we know that the process of this manifestation is not random? It's because it does not fit what we observe around us. The world, when we inquire into it, does not look to be random. There is always a law of nature which is operational. Similarly, there is a law of karma which is always operational, which brings this world into manifestation. This law of karma itself we will discuss later. That's very important. Now, we talked of how of the three gunas and how spiritual practices consists of increasing the composition of sattva in our mind. This is because consciousness is best reflected in a sattvic mind. So sattva gives us clarity through which we can discern, concentrate, we can learn. Rajas gives rise to desire, making us chase the false notion of seeking happiness from the external world. And from tamas, we have ignorance, which veils our real nature and weakens our perception. But we have to remember that gunas means that which binds. So while we work to improve the sattva in our mind, we have to at the same time be aware that it doesn't become something that will bind us. A calm, peaceful environment is conducive to building a sattva, but it should not become something which binds us. We shouldn't become disturbed if our environment is not peaceful. We should, just like right now, you might feel some disturbance because once again, I was having some internet issues and I've had to come to my friend's place to teach this class. But they're being very nice and leaving the room to me most of the time. So I was saying that while certain things are conducive for sattva, like a calm, peaceful environment, it should not become something that disturbs us if this is not there. So for a sadhaka, it is said that sattva is at some point becomes the biggest obstacle, the biggest attachment, which must also be dropped. So while we are building sattva, we have to ensure that we aim to build a pure sattva, that of a detached form. Such a sattvic mind does not condemn rajas and tamas, but understands their value in the scheme of this transactional reality. By building sattva in the mind, this Atmananda is better reflected. Mind is the instrument which must be used to eventually transcend itself. You might be working very hard at your sadhana, and it will be finally fruitful at that point when you realize that all of it was Maya. All this sadhana was Maya. Thinking you need to do sadhana is also Maya, because you always were Brahman. There is nothing you're doing to achieve this Brahman status. However, this sadhana is Vidya Maya, and it is useful till such time you achieve sufficient chitta shuddhi for jnanam to take root. Because Vidya Maya will manifest as Viveka, as Vairagyam, and all these qualities for chitta shuddhi, and hence it's useful. Avidya Maya, on the other hand, manifests as greed, aversion, attachment, and thereby it will trap us in samsara. But I'm saying all this for us to remember that anything we experience is only Maya. But the way out of this Maya is also through Maya. It's like in wilderness class, they will teach you that if you have a thorn very stuck very deep in, and you don't have any other tools at hand, sometimes the best tool to remove that thorn is is another thorn. So keep the sadhana till such time it is necessary. Till such time you no longer have to question, do I need to do any sadhana? Keep adding more sattva in the mind and enjoy better and better reflection of that Atmananda till such time you can completely abide in that Atmananda. But like I spoke of the example of the hungry man before, it is not when he finishes eating only that the hungry man gets his hunger satiated. During the process of eating also the hunger keeps getting satiated, right? So after Maya, we had started talking about the evolution of the universe. And why are we talking of this? Because just like at the Vyashti level, to understand what is Atman, what is this real inner essence that we are talking about, we started with the gross body, because that is the easiest to understand. And from there, we moved on to the subtle body. And from there, the Karna Shariram. And then from there, we talked exactly of what is Atman, that inner essence. So similarly, now to understand the Samashti, this macrocosm, we are again starting with, the visible, what is the gross part, this universe, this prapancha that we see. And hence we will talk about the process of evolution of this prapancha. So there are actually, evolution will be presented in 4 stages. The first stage we already saw in the previous class. The first stage is called Panchabhuta Shrishti. It is the formation of the Sukshma Panchabhutani. It's the evolution of the subtle 5 elements. So from the beginningless Maya, the Anadi Maya, which is completely dependent on Brahman, with the grace of Brahman only it functions. The subtle 5 elements are born. And as the Karanam, the cause, Maya is made of 3 gunas. The Karyam, the product, hence, is also the nature of these 3 gunas. Just like children have the characteristics of the patients, any product will have the characteristics of the substance it is created from. So in this, I'm talking of the first stage, we said out of Maya space, Akasha is first created. But remember that it's not the space that you experience now. It is subtle. So it's of the subtle form. We'll talk about the gross form of the space later on. So first space is created. And from there, Vayu, the air element, subtle air element is created. And from Vayu, Agnihi, the fire element is created. And from Agnihi, Apaha, or also known as Jalaha, the water element is created. And from there, Prithvi, the earth element is created, all the subtle elements. So it's going from, even within this subtle, it's going from the subtle to the less subtle, because each can be perceived by one more sense organ. So Akasha only has the property of sound, but then Vayu additionally has a property of touch. It can also be perceived by the skin, in addition to that of the sound. And Agni has a third property of shape, form, sight, which can be perceived by the sight. And Jalaha has the additional property of taste. And Prithvi has all five properties. It can be perceived by all five senses. So that was the first stage of the Srishti that we already discussed. So right now we're still in the recap of what's been discussed so far. So now from there, we will go on to talk of the next three stages in the evolution. To just give you a brief overview, in the second stage, it's called the Sukshma Bhautikani. So these subtle elements, the five elements, will give rise to various subtle bodies. So Bhutani is the elements and Bhautikani is the products of the elements. So Bhutani modified becomes Bhautikani, just like matter modified becomes material. So the second stage is about these subtle bodies which are formed from these subtle elements. And so these are, we already looked at what these subtle elements are. We're talking about the mind, the Panchaprana, the Sukshma Shariram, and we will look at how all these are formed. And also all these invisible lokas like Swarga Loka are also formed from the subtle elements. So that is the Sukshma Bhautika Srishti, which is the second stage. And there is this third stage called the Stula Bhuta Srishti. Stula means gross, as we know. And at the third stage, we will look at the evolution of the physical or the gross five elements, how they become gross. And that stage is called the Stula Bhutani. And the fourth and the final stage is the Stula Bhautika Srishti, and how from the gross five elements, this gross universe and the gross bodies are formed. That is the fourth stage. So any questions with what we covered so far? Otherwise, we will dive into the text and the next stages of evolution. Okay, great. I'll share my screen. So we're now at page 14, at the end of page 14 in your text. So you can unmute yourself to repeat after me. Etesham panchatattvanam madhye Akashasya satvikamshat Shotendriyam sambhutam Vayoh satvikamshat Svagindriyam sambhutam Agnehe satvikamshat Chakshundriyam sambhutam. Jalasya satvikamshat. Rasnendriya sambhutam. Prithviyah satvikamshat. Granendriya sambhutam. So the author is saying from these 5 subtle elements, the 5 sense organs of knowledge up. Now, we already saw that the sense organs of knowledge belong to the subtle body, the Sukshma Shariram. And it would be useful for us to remember once again that when we talk of the sense organs, we are talking of the Indriyam and not the physical part, the Golakam. So I'm not referring to these physical eyes or these physical ears, but I'm talking about the power behind these eyes and the power behind these ears. Now, just for the ease of use, I might say eyes or ears, but you should always remember that I'm talking of the Indriyam, not the physical part, the Golakam, because even a blind man has eyes, but he doesn't have the perception of sight, right? So now that we might want to know, we said that the 5 elements are made of 3 gunas. Now, which of these gunas are responsible for the Gyanendriya? The author tells us, Etesham pancha tattvanam madhye, among these 5 elements, akashasya satvikamshat, from the sattvic part of the space element, shotendriya sambhutam, the ears are born. So how do we understand this? So why are the ears born from the space element? We said that Akasha has Shabda, sound, as a unique property, and hence ears, which are the product of Akasha, recognize the sound of Akasha because they're grateful to Akasha. So whichever organ is born out of whichever element, that organs perceive the special property of that element. So similarly, in the text goes on, Vayoho satvikamsha twagendriya sambhutam. From the subtle element of Vayu, air, Twagindriyam, the organ of touch, is born. And we know that the additional special property of Vayuhu, in addition to sound, is also touch, right? So this has 2 properties that it can be recognized by, right? So the sound and also touch property. Agnehe satvikamshat chakshurindriya sambhutam. From the subtle element of fire, Agnihi, chakshu indriyam, the organ of sight, is born. And hence it will have that additional quality of being able to identify also form. And jalasya satvikamshat rasnendriya sambhutam. And from the subtle element of water, the subtle aspect of water, the sattvic aspect of it, the organ of taste is born. And Prithviya Sattvikamshat Granendriya Sambhutam. And from the sattvic aspect of Prithvi, the earth element, the Granendriyam, the organ of smell, is born. And so that's all basically it says here. So each of these, all the sense organs of knowledge are born from the sattvic aspect of the 5 elements. And each is born from one particular sattvic aspect of one element alone. Now, but there is also something born from the combination of all these 5 elements. So that we will see. So again, call and repeat. Etesham panchatattvanam samashti sattvikamshat mano buddhyahankara chittanta karanani sambhutani there is someone, there's a lot of disturbance from one particular person. If they can identify, if they can mute themselves. Yeah. Sankalpa vikalpa atmaka manah. Atmakam manah. Nishchayatmika buddhihi. Ahankararthahankarah. Chintan krita chintam chittam manaso devata chandramaha buddhehe brahmaha ahankarasya rudraha chittasya vasudevaha. So now we're still talking about the evolution of the sattvic aspect. Now, it's being said here that mind is born out of the sattva guna of the combination of all the 5 elements. Now, this is again obvious because the mind needs to coordinate with all the 5 sense organs. As the coordinator, not only does it collect what each of the sense organ observes, but coordinates between them. Or else the eyes won't see the approaching car that the ears are hearing, and so on, right? So the author says, Etesham panchatattvanam samashti sattvikamsha. From the total sattva taken from the 5 elements, the inner instrument called antakaranam is born. Now, this inner instrument as such is only one. We looked at it before, but it is known by 4 functional names. Like the same person can be known as the daughter in one role, as a mother in another role, manager at a company in another role, the Vedanta student in another role. But the person is the same. It's just the functional classifications of what that person does. So here the inner instrument is antakaranam, and it has 4 functional names, which is manaha, which is the mind. And it says, the text, Sankalpa Vikalpa Atmakam Manaha. Sankalpa Vikalpa means the doubting, the oscillating, the wavering function is that of the mind. So do I sleep in some more, or do I wake up, get ready for class and come to class? Should I quit this job and look for a new one, or should I just stay? Do I take this road or do I take that one? So all this oscillating functions is that of the mind. And buddhihi, sorry, I'll just mute everyone. Yeah. And buddhihi is nischayatmika buddhi, the deciding faculty. So it is what stops this oscillations and the decision is made. This is the road I will take. I will wake up now, right now, so that I can do all my morning practices well and get ready for the class. So buddhi is the deciding faculty. Ahankara, it says ahankarta ahankara. This sense of I-ness is by which we identify with the body and the mind. That is ahankara. So we don't say the body has a pain. We say I have a pain. We don't say the mind is experiencing happiness or sadness. We say I am happy, or we say I am sad. So we don't say this particular body has been gifted with a great voice. We say I have a great voice, or I am a very intelligent person. So we completely identify with this mind-body complex. We get this sense of I-ness from it, and this is the hankara. And chittam is chinta kritam chittam, the memory faculty, the recollection ability is the chittam. So earlier when we were talking about the Sukshma Shariram, the author had only mentioned two. Now the additional two are also mentioned. So we get it from all here. Sambhutani simply means is born. Now, each of the organs also has a presiding deity. And like we saw before, this presiding deity represents the total power behind this total power. And we call them Devata in Sanskrit. So the Manaso Devata is Chandrama, the presiding deity of the mind is the moon. And this is something actually that many of us would have observed, often how people's tendencies, emotions seem to be affected by the moon. And why not? We see that moons can cause big tidal waves. So why not something as the mind? In fact, during the lockdown, when we were in the ashram, because we were all doing so much yogic practices, and the environment was so sattvic, perhaps this could be felt even more, because during the full moon, a lot of people would suddenly say, I didn't sleep that well, or I was having a lot of disturbed dreams and such. So the moon very much affects the mind. So now actually this is diverting a little bit from Vedanta, but just to give a perspective of what this actually means is when we are talking about the full moon and how it affects the mind, it basically is representing the extroverted power. This is kind of this is when you have more energy to do things out in the world. And we talk of the no moon in a lot of these sayings, at least in South India, we have this saying where if someone's very depressed or something, they say they're under the influence of, the new moon, but it actually this is the time, the new moon time is basically when your introverted it's kind of like your inside lights are turned on. So when the energy is already low in someone, it might show up as like someone being depressed or sad. But for someone who is well tuned and doing all their practices, it can also reflect as where you'll have a lot of intuitive power. You will have a lot of heightened powers of perception. You might be able to meditate better. Oftentimes, it shows up as not like, an intuitive power, but more of it as a depressive power, is because this is a period when nature is kind of telling you to go inwards. But in the world we live in today, which is completely externally focused, we don't often have the time to be silent, take this silent time for ourselves. So we are not doing what nature is telling us to do. So we're not in tune with nature. So hence we're not able to utilize this power to its fullest. So the same cycle of the moon can actually also be seen in the inbuilt menstrual cycle of a woman. So it's kind of has to be in layers. In ancient cultures around the world, when all the menstruating women kind of used to sit in a hut before taking any big decisions, like should we go to war, should we harvest the crop, they would go to this hut and ask the women, because during the menstruation, the women were supposed to have their intuitive power at the best. So for all the women here, I would encourage you to observe this, and for the men also, I would encourage you to observe how the moon affects these cycles. Like I said, it's a side topic, not related to Vedanta, but something I quite enjoy talking about. So maybe we can take a separate session of it. But just a final kind of interesting fact that I heard from a data scientist friend. So he was working for one of these e-commerce sites like Flipkart or Amazon, and they were trying to always see patterns of when do we get these cancellations and returns. So we have all these theories of it's because it's the end of the month or the beginning of the month when the salary is low and this and that. They couldn't figure out any of these patterns to do with the day of the month. But because he's into yoga practices too, he mapped these cycle with the cycle of the moon. And he noticed that the data showed that the maximum number of cancellations and returns happened when the orders were placed during full moon, because this is when people were kind of more excitable. Just a little humorous clip. So the Manaso Devata is moon. It's the presiding deity of the mind. And the presiding deity of Buddhi is... sorry, there's a question from Neetu. Can you explain this again? Which part, Neetu? Would you like to be explained again? Okay, about the moon. So I'll take it maybe after the main session, because this is not actually part of the session. I was digressing a little bit. Yeah. So I'll come back to it. Please remind me. So the presiding deity of Buddhi is Brahma, Lord Brahmaji, and not Brahman, who's married to Saraswati Devi, and his four heads represent the four Vedas. So Buddhi's presiding deity is Lord Brahmaji. And the presiding deity of Ahankara is Rudra, which is another name for Shiva. Lord Shiva presides over the ego, because as we can see, Ahankara, the ego can be a cause of destruction, can be the cause of many problems. So here, hence we say this. And the presiding deity of Chitta, memory, is Vasudeva. Lord Vishnu presides over and protects the memory. So we saw now that from the Vyashti Sattva, the individual the five elements are born, and from the Samashti Sattva, four elements are born. So from the Vyashti Sattva, we had the five Gyanendriyas which were born, and from the Samashti Sattva, we had additional four elements of Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara, and Chittam which are born. So far we have 9 elements that have been covered. So you will see that we are adding up to that 24 elements which was mentioned in the beginning of the class. So far 9 have been covered. So now let's look at the Rajasic Guna, the evolution of the Rajasic Guna. We will again chant. Is there any questions related to the text itself, except for the bit about the moon? Okay. So I'll chant and you can repeat by muting yourself. Etesham panchatattvanam madhye.
एतेषां पञ्चतत्त्वानां मध्ये
Akashasya Akashasya rajasamshat
आकाशस्य राजसंशात्
Vagindriya sambhutam
वागीन्द्रियसम्भूतम्
Vayoho rajashamsat
वायोः राजसात्
Panindriyam sambhutam
पानीन्द्रियं सम्भूतम्
Vahnehe rajasamshat
राजसाक्षात्
Padendriyam sambhutam
पादेन्द्रियं सम्भूतम्
Jalasya rajasamshat
जलस्य राजसांशात्
Upastendriyam sambhutam
उपस्थेन्द्रियं सम्भूतम्
Prithviya rajasamshat
पृथिव्या राजसांशात्
Gudendriyam sambhutam
उदेन्द्रियं सम्भूतम्
Etesham samashti rajasamshat
एतेषां समष्टिराजसांशात्
Pancha pranaha sambhutam Pancha pranaha sambhutaha
प्राणाः सम्भूताः
Yeah, thank you. So we're talking about the evolution of the Rajasic aspect now. And so the text says, from the Rajasic part of the 5 elements, the Karmindriyas are born. The organs of action are born. We hopefully now all understand that Rajas represents activity. So hence it's logical that the Karmindriyas, the organs of actions, are born from the Rajasic element. The Rajasic aspect of Akasha, from this, the organ of speech is born. And it says, and from the Rajasic aspect of Vayuhu, Panindriyam, the organ of the hands are born. And from the Rajasic aspects of Agni, the fire element, the legs are formed. From the Rajasic aspect of water, anus is born, or in another version of the translation, it says the genitals are formed. So we can take it either one. And the author says, from the Samashti Rajoguna, the Rajasic elements of Rajasic aspect of all the 5 elements together, prana is born, which is again obvious because to do any kind of activities, to be able to use our hands or legs, we need prana. We need energy for all these activities from the prana. when we say prana, we're of course talking about the pancha prana, which we studied before, which is to quickly recap, is prana, the respiratory function, apana, the excretion function, vyana, the circulation function, samana, the digestion function, udana, the emergency evacuation or the reversing function. To again summarize, we have now 5 Gyanendriyas and 4 of elements of the Antakaranam, which have been formed from the sattvic aspects. And from the rajasic aspect, we got the 5 karmendriyams, and from the samashti rajasic aspect, we got the pancha prana. So 5 plus 4 plus 5 plus 5, we have total 19 organs which have been now formed in the second stage from the subtle 5 elements of the first stage. So these 19 elements constitute the Sukshma Shariram. And so we still have, we are still working up towards 24, the Chaturvimshati Tattvam that we spoke of when introducing the chapter. Right. So actually, no. So we've now reached the Chaturvimshati Tattvam because including these, the 19 elements that we just counted, plus the 5 elements of the stage 1, these together make up the 24. So that is the Chaturvimshati Tattvam that we are speaking of. That is represents this universe. So you would have noticed that we talked about the sattvic aspects and the rajasic aspect, and the tamasic aspect is left out. So what evolves from the tamasic aspect, that we will look at now. So again, you can unmute yourselves. Etesham panchatattvanam tamashat panchakrita panchatatvani bhavanti.
panchatatvani bhavati.
Panchakaranam katamiti.
Panchakaranam katamiti.
Chet. Etesham panchamahabhutanam.
Etesham panchamahabhutanam.
Tamasamshaswarupam.
Tamasaswarupam.
Ekamekam bhutam.
Ekamekam bhutam.
Dvida vibhajyam. Ekameka ardham.
Ekamekam
Prutak tushnim vyavastapyam.
Tushnim vyavasthapya.
Aparamardham.
Aparamaparamadham.
Chaturda vibhajyam.
Chaturda vibhajya.
Swadamardhameshu.
Swadamardhameshu.
Ardeshu. Swabhagachatushtaya samyojanam.
Shambhagya samyojanam.
Karyam.
Karyam.
Tada panchikaranam bhavati.
तदा
तदा
पञ्चीकरणं
पञ्चीकरणं
भवति
भवति
एतेभ्य पंचीकृत पंचमहाभूतेभ्य
एतेभ्यः
एतेभ्य
पञ्चकृत पञ्चमहाभूतेभ्यः
पञ्चीकृतपञ्चमहाभूतेभ्यः
स्थूल शरीरं भवति
स्थूलशरीरं
स्थूलशरीरं
भवति
भवति
एवं
एवं
पिण्डा ब्रह्माण्डयोरैकम्
पिण्डब्रह्माण्डकोरेक्यं
सम्भूतम्.
सम्भूतम्
So actually now I need to share another image because we're going to talk about how the gross elements are created from the from the tamasic part of the subtle elements. But how do they become grossified? How do these invisible become visible? So the author anticipates this question as usual and says, Panchi Karanam Katam iti chet. This is the process of grothification. So let me share one image which will help. Right. Can you see the image on my screen well?
yes
Okay, great. So this basically shows, I'll just quickly run over the previous diagram is what we already talked about, how from Maya, the 5 elements are born, right? Can you see the cursor on the screen moving when I do this?
yes
Okay, great. So the 5 elements are born from Maya and from the Sattva Guna of the individual of these 5 elements. From the Sattva Guna of Akasha, we got the organ of the ear, and from the Sattva Guna of Vayu, we got the skin. From the Sattva Guna of Agni, we got eyes. From the Sattva Guna of water, we got the tongue. And from the Sattva Guna of earth, we got this nose. And again, of course, I'm talking about the Indriyams, not the Golakams. And from the Samashti Sattva Guna of all these 5, right, we got the Antakaranam. And similarly, for the Rajasic elements, from each of the aspects, single aspects of Akasha, Vayu, the Rajasic aspects of these, we got the each of the Karmindriyas. And from the Samashti as Rajasic aspect of these 5 elements, we got the Panchaprana. So now we are moving on to the Tamasic. Yeah. So from the Tamasic Guna, what happens? So these, in their original form, these are known as Tanmantras. So Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apa, Prithvi, that's the stage 1 that you're seeing here in this picture. And Ekam Bhutam Dvida Vibhajya. So the author says each of these elements are split into 2. That is the second stage. Now, in the third stage, the same thing which has been split into 2, the top half remains intact, one half remains intact. That is what the text is also saying. Ekam ekamardam pritak tushnim vyapastasya. One half remains intact, and the other half something will happen to it in stage 4. In sorry, my bad. Yeah, in stage 4, the second half of each of these gets divided into 4 equal parts. With me so far? Right? And so basically now, if you look at stage 4 of Akasha, you see there are one half is there in black, and the other half has been split into 4 white verticals. So each of these 4 white verticals is like what? It's 1/4 of a half, so it's 1/8. Right, so we have in this picture showing 4 1/8 parts of Akasha. So each of this 1/8 part now in the 5th stage gets added to. So 1/8 of Akasha stays in Akasha. Sorry, 1/8 of Akasha gets added to Vayu. 1/8 of Akasha gets added to Agni. 1/8 of Akasha gets added to Apaha, and the other 1/8 gets added to Prithvi. So the final element that we call by the name Akasha, the gross Akasha that we see, the gross space that we see, has predominantly the subtle Akasha element. Half of it is the subtle Akasha element, and the other half is 1/8 of each of the other 4 elements. So that's how the grossified elements are formed. Is that kind of clear, or should I go over any part again?
Not clear at all.
Okay, yeah, this is the bit of the technical part. So let me repeat it once more. So stage 1 is clear to everyone? So the tanmatras are there as is. With me so far?
Yes.
Okay, and stage 2, we're just splitting them into 2.
Spandana ji, it would be,
Yeah.
we would be happy if you could please send us this figure also.
Yeah, certainly. I'll send you this figure.
Sometimes
So,
it's confusing.
yeah, for sure. I understand. So just follow me step by step. I will send you this
Yes.
figure also.
Thank you.
So first stage is very simple. It's just as is, right? Second stage, we've just divided into 2. Everyone's clear so far? Okay. And now third stage, nothing has happened. Just the color has changed. We're just emphasizing that the thing that we divided into 2, the first half we're not going to touch. We'll only play with the second half that we've divided. Okay? So nothing has happened so far. So far, we just split this thing into 2. Right? And first part we're not going to touch. That's all we said. Now in the 4th stage, we're saying that the second half, which was in this 3rd stage, this one half of this, we're going to further split into 4 parts. So when you divide a half into 4 parts, what happens? It becomes 1/8, right? So by the 4th stage now, Akasha element half is still there, and the other half has been split into further 4 parts. So I have half of Akasha plus 1/8, 1/8, 1/8, 1/8 of Akasha. All right. So far I've only split Akasha into half plus 4 1/8s, but I've not done anything with it. Clear so far?
Yes.
Okay. And now in the 5th stage, this black part I've just inverted to make it easy to understand. So Akasha, this same black part is here in the 5th stage. So this half of Akasha is still there. Nothing has happened to it. But these bottom 4 parts of Akasha, which are 1/8, 1/8, 4 1/8s of Akasha, are removed from Akasha, and each of the 1/8 is added. 1 is there. So 1 refers to Akasha here. So 1 is there in Vayuhu. 1/8 has gone to Agnihi. 1/8 has gone to Apaha. and 1/8 has gone to Prithvi. With me?
Yes.
Okay. So similarly, so 2 refers to Vayu. Okay. So in Akasha now, it already has, Akasha retains its half. It got 1/8 of Vayu, right? That is the 2. It got 1/8 of Agni. It got 1/8 of Apaha, and it got 1/8 of Prithvi. So the grossified Akasha that we see basically contains of half the subtle Akasha element, and half is made of the other 4 elements. Yeah, so this is the process of grossification. Similarly, in Vayu, Vayu retains half of the subtle Vayu element, and the other half is Akasha, Agni, Apaha, and Prithvi. Yeah, clear so far? So that's it. So whichever element, the name it gets from what is predominant in that element. So Akasha, what we call Akasha, like that we perceive this Akasha, is predominantly half of it is the subtle Akasha and half of it is the subtle parts of the other 5 elements. This is called the process of grossification. So this is a bit like, you know, when you're learning algebra in school, you're not sure when you will use it, but trust me, it comes at some points. You know, Vedas has a point for everything. So all these concepts are used elsewhere in Vedas, like in Ayurveda, for example, a lot of these things will come into play. So it might not always be relevant for you, but this is just one of the basics, which is good to know. And it'll come up in subtle ways here and there in your study of Vedanta. So is that clear? If anyone's still not clear, I'm happy to repeat it once more. Or
Ma'am, this whole chart is around tamasic guna.
Yeah, this whole chart is only covering the tamasic guna.
Okay.
So tamasic guna is the gross, is giving rise to the gross elements.
Okay.
So what was coming out of the sattva guna and rajo guna was in your sukshma shariram.
Okay.
And the tamasic guna gives rise to the gross elements, which will, of course, so this is the 3rd stage where the grossification of the 5 elements are happening. And in the 4th and final stage, from these gross elements, the gross universe is formed, the gross bodies are formed, everything that we see is formed. And that completes the process of evolution. So I'll also send you these diagrams. Right. Any questions so far about this class? So now we've concluded. Actually, I'll just conclude for the last few sentences in the text. So the author concludes saying, Tada panchi karanam bhavati. Upon the creation of such compounds, the subtle elements become gross elements. And after that, etebhya panchikrita pancha mahabhutaihi stula shariram bhavati. From the 5 gross elements so formed, the gross body is born. So this gross body that we all see, and these beautiful bodies that you see here. So this is that's basically it. And yeah, like I said, it's not just the gross body which is formed, but this entire stula prapancha, the gross universe, is also a mixture of these 5 gross elements. So pancha stula bhutani and also the stula bhautikani, all are created through this process. So now we've covered all the 4 stages of creation. And the author says, Evam pinda brahmanda Brahmandayor ekam sambhutam. Thus, the Pinda, individual who has 5 elements, Brahmandayoho, and Brahmandayo, the cosmos, also has 5 elements. And this is how the individual fits into the cosmological order. So, and we call this universe Prapancham because it's made of these 5 elements. So that concludes our topic of evolution. And if there's any questions, we can take those now. All right. So that's it. I mean, someone wanted me to explain.
Spandana ji, I just want to know, I mean, what was this question and what answer the author has given? Like, what was the question behind this?
So in this bit, the lot of the questions were kind of assumed, you know. So
Okay.
the author kind of went on to answer without specific questions. He started explaining about the process of evolution. But
Okay.
like I mentioned, we are doing this process of, we're trying to understand the gross world.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, when we did the inquiry of what is Atma, we first saw that, you know, I'm not this body, I'm not the Sthula Shariram, I'm not the Sukshma Shariram, I'm
Yeah.
not the Karna Shariram. So to understand everything which you're not, it's important to evaluate everything that we perceive. Right.
Got it.
So, yeah. So someone also wanted me to explain what
You also said one thing that a blind also have eyes, but they lack the caliber of perception. What
Right.
what did that mean?
So we talked about 2 Sanskrit terms, Indriyam and Golakam, repeatedly.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So, so when I'm talking about Indriyam, I'm saying, just for ease of use, I might say the organ of sight or eyes. But
Yeah.
you have to remember that you're not talking about this physical eye that you see on my body.
Got that.
We are talking about the power which is driving this perception of sight. So that is what an Indriyam is. So I was making the distinction between what is an Indriyam and what is a Golakam. So the physical eye is the Golakam. So the physical eye is there in a blind person. It's there even in a dead person.
Got
but
that.
The power of sight does not exist.
Okay, got that. Thank you.
Someone had a question about what I was saying about the moon. Was there anything specific about it they wanted to check? Was it Neetu? Were you asking?
I was asking about the moon thing, which you discussed, no? Like that Flipkart, that marketing data showed. So I was like little confused.
Okay.
In moon, there more cancellation or new moon? So which time is good?
It's not good or bad. What I was trying to
marketing perspective, I'm asking.
Yeah, from the marketing perspective, what they realized was, so generally during the full moon, people tend to be more extroverted, more excitable.
Yeah.
You know, so there is more outward energy. So which is why during full moon, a lot of people also say, you know, they did not sleep well, or they were having very vivid dreams, or it's kind of a more excitable time. So in a disbalanced side, this excitement can show up as making rash decisions, you know. So this data scientist friend of mine, he found that during full moon, people were maybe making purchases that, you know, out of excitement, you know, that they were seeing these discounts or something. So they made purchases which later they would regret, and hence a lot of these purchases would end up in cancellations.
But from the marketing perspective, it's good that they buy if there's no return policy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. But this is actually, you know, maybe at another point, like, because it's not to do with Vedanta, but it's a topic I enjoy very much. I can offer maybe a separate class on it, because based on the cycle of the moon, cycle of
Because
your
I'm working on
menstrual.
my yoga studio marketing now, so that like look very interesting for me. So
Oh,
what
yeah,
did you
that wasn't my definitely not the
I
intention of this Vedanta class, but no, but anyway, to say all this on a more serious note, when I'm talking about the moon or the menstrual cycle, um, take it as there is nothing bad or good. These are just cycles of nature. Everything in nature is cyclic. So same thing which can be looked at as irrational behavior, it'll come hand in hand with a lot of energy, a lot of power to be out there, be engaged in multiple activities. It'll be the best time for you to play the role of a host, best time for you to be like multitasking, dealing with a lot of things at the same time, right? But you have to layer it with the moon and your cycle, what's happening internally. In the end, it all just comes back to always observing how the three gunas are playing on your mind, right? So instead of sticking to any rules, always when you find a tendency to do something or not do something, understand what is the guna at play there. So for example, if you getting so a lot of women say PMS, like but it just means premenstrual syndrome. Whenever modern science says syndrome, they basically don't know what it means. In Vedanta, you can understand it better. Like basically you can understand that there's a particular, you're having a lower threshold at that point for some reason. So in the context of the cycles, it's
more
like a full
distracted.
workshop actually. So I won't go into that right now because it's like a few hours discussion really. But very simply, if you just want to always observe what gunas are at play, right? So if someone comes and snaps at you, I mean, you find that you're more kind of short-tempered than usual. They've not maybe done something which is thought of character, but maybe at that point your threshold is smaller, so you've kind of exaggerated what's happening higher, right?
Is there any
So
app in which I can track the moon cycle along with, like I can enter how I am feeling today and just track it and create a graph for that key, how my mood swings?
I'm not aware of any app as per se, which would help you track both, but there is a lot more to it. So more than depending on it, see, in Vedanta, we're always working on making sure that we are not blaming external factors
Right.
for something we feel or whatever. But it is also important to know, because we are made of the 5 elements, right? So we are influenced by the 5 elements. So our mind is influenced by the moon. Our mind is influenced by, so all these things that we studied right now, it'll come into play if you're studying Ayurveda, for example, right? So if you're of a Vata predominant nature, and if you're in a very cold, very dry, very windy environment, your Vata will get aggravated and you will feel less able to focus. So just imagine, like, you don't even have to be Vata. Imagine, so close your eyes and imagine how will you feel if you're sitting right now in a mountain area, which I am in actually, and you're sitting outside and it's very windy and very cold. How will you feel initially, right? So initially you might feel that coolness, but if you stay exposed for longer, very soon you will start getting agitated, you'll feel shivery, you will feel like, like moving. So so just like your body feels like moving, your mind will also be racing and moving. So you will not be able to, unless you're a very practiced yogi, you will not be able to sit in this cold, windy environment and say meditate, for example. Right. And and similarly, if you're in a hot if you go out on a hot, humid day in a coastal area like say Chennai, for example, you just stepped out of your home outside and you're sitting there for a while, how will you feel? Initially, you might feel that slight warmth, but if it's a very hot day, very humid, very soon you will start feeling very uncomfortable, right? And you will want to cool down.
Like
Right.
too much of rain can make you very depressive, like without sun. So that's also one of the things. Like some cities like Seattle, for example, or like in India also, there are like many cities where like it's continuous raining. So it may make you feel very low in energy.
Right. Sorry, 1 second.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'll just basically all this in short, just to say how the elements affect us all. So someone asking me a question, what am I basing all this on? So whenever it's not based on Vedanta, like I say it's not Vedanta. So it's, thank you for noticing I said that. So I'm basing some of these on just things I know about Ayurveda. Some of these I'm basing on these workshops I attended and talk of called menstrual cycle awareness and moon cycle awareness. So these are not Vedanta per se. In Vedanta itself, you will have all the tools enough actually. So these are just some additional things, things I picked up here and there. But the basic concept is really basic concept is just that everything you feel is a play of Maya, right? So like I said, there is Vidya Maya, like, which it showcases as, this Viveka, Vairagyam and all, and there is Avidya Maya, which is largely a play of Rajoguna and Tamoguna. So whatever is happening, whatever you're perceiving in your mind is always a play of these gunas. And you have to understand this Maya to be able to overcome this Maya. That's and as you keep studying Vedanta, you will get so many tools to be able to do that. So it's all basically just understanding your own mind and then eventually being able to transcend that mind. Okay. All right. So that's it. I'll stop the recording.